Welcome back on the AM show. We get into the big stories. And first off, our main focus for today, we're going to be looking at, contemplating the vice president and also flag bearer of the New Patriotic Party and his plan for Ghana. We're going to be contemplating what the vice president has been sharing with us, together with his technical advisor, Kabiru Mahama, Dr. Kabiru Mahama. He joins the conversation in the studio. Doc, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So let's start from here. I think it's only fitting to also indicate that Dr. Kabiru Mahama, in the latest NPP's parliamentary primaries, was given the nod as the candidate for the NPP in Wale. The caveat being that there is a bit of an issue there, and so the matter is in court. But for now, congratulations all the same.
Thank you.
As that court issue is sorted out. I'd like to give you the first few minutes to walk us through what happened just a few days ago at the University for Professional Studies, Accra, what went into the planning, and what we saw on D-Day when the Vice President laid out his roadmap, if you like, should he become president. Just spend a few minutes walking us through what exactly the message was.
All right, so thank you very much and good morning to you and to your cherished listeners across the country. The Vice President on Wednesday presented to the Ghanaian public his vision. Prior to this, you remember some 4 months ago, the Vice President was given the mandate by the New Patriotic Party, the delegates of the New Patriotic, and by extension, the whole of the New Patriotic Party to be the flag bearer, the torch bearer, and the standard bearer of the party moving into the 2024 election. When the Vice President was given this mandate, he made it clear that, in fact, during the acceptance, he gave us a breadth of his vision. But on this particular occasion, the Vice President used it as a way to give us a very comprehensive contours of his vision to the Ghanaian people so that the Ghanaian people will be able to accept it. So prior to this, for the past 3 months, the Vice President has been planning, the Vice President has been engaging people, the Vice President has been reflecting on the Ghanaian situation, and following this particular long period of examination of the context and the situation in Ghana, the Vice President finally had this opportunity to present. But in order to present such a vision, the Vice President feels like, okay, I'm a job applicant that the Ghanaian people will have to assess. So they have to assess me. They have to assess me on the back of the mandate the president was given, and that mandate, I was supporting the president to deliver that mandate. So what was I able to achieve as the Vice President? The Vice President put the presentation in broadly 3 main parts. The first part was an elucidation of the records of the New Patriotic Party. In other words, he took the time to account for the stewardship of the president under which he actually, the president he supported during the past 7 years. We are going to our 8th year in office. The Vice President also used the opportunity to, articulate specifically the task he was assigned by the president and whether or not he was able to deliver on that task. So that was the second part. And the last part of the Vice President presentation was actually the bold solutions that he was proposing into the future, the path that Ghana need to follow in order to come out of the many difficulties that we found ourselves in recent times, the path that Ghana has to take in order to build a stronger foundation that will leapfrog our country to develop. So basically, the presentation by the Vice President was on this particular direction. The Vice President clearly realizes that, in fact, he is acutely aware of the fact that the Ghanaian people will have to understand what is happening, what we've been able to achieve. And he actually, one important thing that I need to stress was that the Vice President was very clear that, look, even though we've had a difficult period, the president leadership has been marked by a disaster which has never happened since the 1930s, but we've been able to achieve a number of successes. And the Vice President was also clear that I was given the role as the leader and chair of the economic management team, which is a sub-cabinet committee of parliament. I was supposed to provide advice, I provided advice, but the president also tasked me specifically to lead the digitalization agenda of the country, which are also performed, and he highlighted a number of areas that that he was able to achieve. And then clearly the last part was about his vision, which will come to delve in more into the details. So this was the approach the vice president used to address the country. But let me note specifically that the vice president's role, as he was assigned to formalize the economy, is one of the cardinal rules the vice president play, and he can beat his chest any day to tell us that, when I was elected with the president gave me a mandate. The mandate was simple, that lead the formalization of the Ghanaian economy. I was able to do one, ensure that every Ghanaian had a unique identifier, and we are moving towards having every single newborn baby even having a Ghana ID card or a Ghana number. The vice president was clearly of the fact that I promised the Ghanaian people that we need to digitalize the passport application system. We were able to deliver that. The vice president was also clear that we needed to reduce corruption by ensuring that efficiency in public service delivery. That's why we introduced the Ghana.gov. The vice president was also clear that health delivery was key and cardinal, and the provision of essential health services, especially to hard to reach areas, was an important thing for the Ghanaian economy and for the health of the Ghanaian people. He was able to introduce, through the support of the president, the medical drones for the delivery of medical services. The vice president was also clear that the Ghanaian ports have been bedeviled with several inefficiencies, especially with the manual system of clearing our goods. He made sure that together with the Minister for Trade and Industry, we introduced the paperless port system. The vice president was also equally clear that DVLA is losing a lot of revenue on the back of the manual system of application and processing. He was able to give direction to the DVLA to ensure that they go digital. The vice president was also clear that insurance was of an issue where they still do manual insurance, but through his ingenuity and the support of the National Insurance Authority, we were able to deliver also on that. The vice president was equally clear that we will need to do something about payment system, where the financial inclusion of our country is very paramount. Through this, in fact, Ghana have 100% financial inclusion through the mobile money interoperability. The vice president was equally mindful of the fact that the Ghanaian economy is not only based on financial inclusion. There was also the need for us to look at even how students apply for scholarship. Right. Apart from replacing the Ghana ID card with the guarantor system, the vice president also made sure the application was decentralized and made digital for every Ghanaian, irrespective of where you are located, to have the opportunity to apply. The vice president also ensured that at least during his period in office, the property address system is something that we have now had a firm handle over. And we used to give direction using landmarks. But we can now give digital address to every Ghanaian to ensure that we are able to reach our destination, or even the risks, the credit risks will consequently be reduced due to that initiative. So basically, this was what the vice president accounted for specifically in relation to the tax he was given by the president. But also, he also defended the broad economic and macroeconomic records of the president. When you talk about exchange rate, the vice president defended the record on that. When you talk about agriculture growth, he defended the record. When you talk about growth in general, the vice president defended the record. When you talk about gross international reserve, the vice president defended the record. The lending rate, the vice president defended the record. Even on the issues of jobs, the vice president defended the government record on all these aspects.
So I think I've given you quite a bit of ample opportunity to elaborate on a number of things. I have two quick questions for you, and I'll start with this one. You kept saying he had done this when it comes to digitizing, which then leads to digitalization, the monetization, and you're an economist, so you would understand better of the terrain. You kept saying he was able to repetitively, from the DVLA to ports to property identification to the Ghana card and everything. So you are giving that credit to the vice president, whether solely or otherwise, as being the arrowhead for this. How come, though, while we will get to the economy later, if we can do same, how come when it comes to the economic management team, where he conventionally, by convention, heads, and in recent times we've seen photos of the appointment of John Dramani Mahama back then when he was vice president, as being a member of the team. So whether convention is his head or whatever, is it fair then to say that in terms of where we are, tax speaking, economically speaking, like I said, we'll have ample time for the economy, we should also lay the buck at the doorstep of the vice president, or it's a different issue?
It's a different issue.
It is?
Yes, because one, the vice president was given a mandate to lead. Another, the vice president was...
To lead what?
To lead, especially the formalization and digitalization. The other, the vice president was given the...
But he wasn't given the mandate
to advise.
Right.
Okay. When you look even at the number of issues I mentioned as directly attributed to him, he had a secretariat in his office to supervise that.
To supervise what?
The implementation.
I like specifics.
So in the implementation of paperless sports system, the implementation of digitization of the DVLA, the implementation of Ghana ID card, all the digitization agenda that the vice president, there was a secretariat in his office which will liaise with the various institutions to ensure the delivery of those goods or those essential or those items that's so listed. Okay. In the case of the management of the economy, the vice president provided advice. There was no secretariat that provided even oversight, unlike the digitization that we've mentioned. So clearly, one, he has a firm hold of the handle. On the other hand, he did not have a firm. His only role was to advise cabinet using the EMT. So you cannot compare the two to say that, okay, once you were advising, take absolute responsibility for everything. Another one, apart from advising, I was also in charge of implementation. More or less, I was having oversight of the implementation.
Quick question. When exactly? Because especially with Dr. Bawumia, what everyone in Ghana has known him for is the economy. And the 100 and so questions and this and that. So you cannot fault the ordinary Ghanaian for thinking, whoa, when did this? So let me ask you, when exactly did the shift from the core economy, and of course, digitization is part of the economy. When was that shift such that, Vice President, I want you to focus on digitization? When exactly did this happen?
The Vice President, when the government just came into office, the President cleared task to him that be chair the EMT.
Right.
And then also ensure the Ghanaian economy is formalized. This is the task that he was given ab initio. So it is not a case that along the line, the vice, even when you even learn the first time, people were saying the vice president had, even in the early days of the Ghanaian economy, people were saying that he has shifted away from the management of the economy now to digitalization. And it was also, again, explaining to the people that, look, it's not a shift. It's clearly, there's a clear linkage, like you said in your introduction, that there's a clear linkage between the economy and digitalization, which economists have well over agreed onto as a fact. But the vice president never shifted. It is actually based on the tax.
So ab initio, he was focusing on digitization.
Exactly.
I don't remember for the first few months of the MPP's tenure in 2016. I don't remember how. I don't think even in the first year he was this, or even second year he was this hard on digitization until other things came through. It's in the latter stages, especially when the economy had not been faring too well, that we saw him really hammering on that. What do you think you can allude to for that development?
You remember the vice president visited DVLA, visited passport office. That was the early days of our tenure, the president tenure in office, in the first term. Okay, that visit to institution, he visited the Controller and Accountant General, was basically in line with that particular vision. Now, so for me, but even the broader economic issue, the vice president hasn't run away from defending the records.
Right.
He hasn't run away from that. The vice president continually defends the records of the New Patriotic Party in the context of the broader economy. That said, but there is the limit the vice president can do, especially so when he is asked to only advise cabinet and then advise cabinet through the EMT. Okay. Probably he cannot do implementation. Even the vice president, let's assume that he will make policy proposals, suggestions. It is left for someone to implement them.
But you see, that is where you open yourself to criticism. Because people have said, do you remember Emisa Arthur and the 100+ questions? Yeah. Did he know then that Emisa Arthur also was in a position where he was only an advisor and couldn't, impact the economy, couldn't determine what Finance Minister Seth Tekbe would do? Was he aware of that when he was coming up with those questions and lampooning the former vice president, who today has met his maker. Was he aware of that?
Yeah, you see, the vice president was aware of that, and the vice president is even equally aware of that now, that if John Mahama should bring him 150, 170 questions on the economy to answer on behalf of the president, he will have to answer. Okay. If the running mate or even former president, whosoever brings 200 questions on the economy and is asking him to answer, he would answer. So ask him, even as a government spokesperson or someone supporting or advisor to the government or to the vice president, if you ask me such question, it is only fair and proper that I account and provide answers to the best of my ability. So it will not have to take me to be the vice president or be the president himself to answer such questions. So the vice president asking the then vice president of blessed memory, Mr. Atta, to answer those questions was not to suggest that Mr. Atta had final and ultimate responsibility for how the economy was run. The economy always stopped with Mr. John Mahama.
It honestly didn't stop. It honestly didn't sound that way then. He made it appear as though, because everyone knew, I mean, let's face the facts. You can go back, team, we can go back and look at some of these speeches by the former president, and maybe if we find some of them, we can play them. He doesn't sound in them like because back then, yes, they would say incompetent Mahama and everything, but it was accepted that Mahama wasn't an economist, right? So it was Emisa Arthur who was literally lampooned. Of course, he had been governor at the central bank, the Bank of Ghana, which is why I'm focusing on this angle, because it can't be different strokes for different folks. You can't say one thing in one breath and something else in another breath. So if it was good for Emisa Arthur, what's good for the goose must be good for Dr. Bawumia, maybe the gander.
You see, the fact that Dr. Bawumia has also been lampooned, he has also been attacked on the economy. One thing is attacking the vice president and asking him to provide explanation and putting blame or placing responsibility on him. These are two different things. You are blaming Dr. Bawumia because he's part of the economic management team and he's part of government. You are blaming Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia because he's an economist and he ought to have provided advice. You are blaming him because you feel that his advice...
him because he touted himself and was touted by the president. He touted himself and was touted by the president. Recently, I had here in the studio Paul Grave Wachidankwa, your spokesperson on governance and security. He said Bawumia was the best economist in the world, past, present, you know. So, of course, if he's the best economist in the world with where we are as an economy, would you be happy?
I'm clearly happy with the role, the contribution of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia as an economist to the fortunes of the country. I'm very happy.
All right, let me quickly run this by you. Who are the current members of the economic management team?
The current members of the economic management team, the vice president, the minister for trade, Katie Amo. We also have the minister for agriculture, Brian Champong. We also have the finance minister, who is a member of the EMT. We also have Professor Bafo Jan, still a member of the EMT.
He still is there?
Yes, we have the secretary to EMT, Professor Joe Apia. We also have the Minister for Energy, Napo Opoko. We also have who else? We also have the Minister for State of State Enterprises, Honorable Kujo. These are the members of the EMT as it.
Is it Philip Kujo, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How has the constitution of the EMT changed over time? These were not the original members of the EMT.
Yeah, so you see, the EMT is drawn from...
Of course, I know there are different representations.
Yes,
from
different representatives. For instance, anytime you have a change of energy minister, the new energy minister will be a member of the EMT. Agriculture minister was also changed, so he will be a member. The trade minister was also changed. The trade minister resigned, actually. So there will be a new member. So these are the only people, we have changed. Otherwise, the initial members, for instance, Joe Apia has been a member. Professor Jan Bafo has been a member, even though he's not...
Oh, yes, he's been a member ab initio, because yes. I remember when Dr. Bawumia was... Do you remember the members of the former economic management team? Now, do you remember these? I wonder how many Ghanaians, though, were aware that these were the members of, apart from, yes, knowing that some ministerial roles, of course, the finance minister will be there, the energy minister will be there, trade will be there, but whether they have performed to the extent that they will be on the lips of every Ghanaian, it will be knowledge, common knowledge, that these are the members. Do you feel these people, together with the vice president, have delivered then what an economic management team should deliver over time?
So, first and foremost, we need to limit their role to advise. Whether they provided the requisite advice, they were able to, the quality of advice they provided, whether or not the members were able to start to live up to the expectation Ghanaians, the expectation of Ghanaians on them regarding the advice they provide to the president. And that's like the vice president mentioned, the quality of advice, I have no reason to doubt the quality of advice the members of the EMT give to the president. Sitting down and listening to them have deliberation on economic issues and the resolution they have on those issues. Some of them have actually led to massive improvement in the fortunes of the Ghanaian people.
Like which ones?
So, for instance, the advice they give to government on the back of the crisis. The goal for oil, I remember the vice president making the proposal and passing it to cabinet for it to be implemented. I remember also the Bank of Ghana goal exchange program. The BOG also sits on the EMT. So they are also permanent members, more or less, of the EMT. So these are some of the quality advice the people, the EMT members have given government, has given central government or agencies to implement. I also remember on the back of the reduction of benchmark values, the Minister for Trade in collaboration for Minister for Agriculture brought in some list of items we needed to make protection for in the context of local production. The team discussed it and provided advice, and the advice was taken to protect the local industry. That was another advice that I think that the quality of advice, I have no reason to doubt that. Okay, the rice production has increased significantly because of the policy proposal and suggestion the EMT has made. So for me, the quality of advice that the team gave the president, I have no reason to doubt that. However, you see, we can still say that there are certain things that Ghanaians...
I'm sure that same advice was also brought to bear when the finance minister was saying we were proud people that would never go the way of the IMF. And eventually we ended up there, much later than we ought to have, accepted by international institutions, including even the credit ratings agencies, and including other, CSOs, the minority, who said we should have gone a lot earlier and left us in the lurch. I guess all of that advice will also be factored in, right?
Yeah, all that advice. And I feel like, sincerely, the decision to go to the IMF was the last resort. The finance minister was clear that we can manage our affairs. There's no need to go to the IMF. The deputy finance minister was clear that we are not going to the IMF. But when push came to shove, we needed to do that. And under the circumstances, the Ghanaian economy had no option than to opt for such an option. So when you are basically optionless, you have to take measures that would actually save your economy, that would save life. And you remember on the back of that, the vice president came out clearly to defend the Bank of Ghana on their decision to, in fact, extend credit to the central government to make sure that central government is able to hold on to the crisis until normalcy return. So for me, we can discuss the IMF program in this context, but you see, IMF program, as it were, no country will want to go for the IMF program unless, of course, it's a measure of last resort. And I think that the government took that decision because there was basically no option out for the government than to sign on to the program.
But a good sign of proper leadership, economic leadership, is knowing it's like running a bank or running some financial institution, a financial house. You know when your books are not right and when you need help versus when you don't need help and you can get things afloat. There's the famous, mention of Elon Musk. At a point, I think he nearly sold Tesla to, is it Google? And I don't know whether it was Google or Amazon, one of those. And he was going to sell off, the entity with some controlling management and all of that. Then all of a sudden, they were able to make a lot of sales. I think they brought in $11 million, and then they stalled the sale. The point is, if you're running a business, you ought to know when you're in the red and when you're in the black, and when things are going well, and whether even when you are in the red, you can actually claw your way back using different resources. But when it is clear, the writing is on the wall, and you wait till you are going to be in a situation where even getting credits is going to be problematic. Look at what we went through to get there. But we're not having an IMF conversation. That's a conversation for another day. We'll come back to the economy because we've also fact-checked a number of things that Dr. Bawumia has said, whether they are plausible, whether they are true, whether they are factual, and whether they are not. We'll be bringing that in a bit when I also bring in Isaac Kofi Ejay. But let me ask you, the Vice President, the NDC says when they elect their running mate or suggest their running mate, they will have a co-driver. The Vice President says he's a driver's mate. I'm sure many Ghanaians who have questioned it are interested in this driver's mate or assistant headmaster explanation. Can you explain to us what it means to be a driver's mate?
Yeah, so the driver's mate, basically used by the Vice President, is analogous to someone who supports the driver to do other peripheral activities that the driver himself would not ordinarily be able to do. For instance, imagine a driver having to collect fares at the same time drive passengers. Imagine the driver having to, stand to open the door of the car for passengers to board, and then he embarks. I mean, such will be a very difficult task for the driver. Ultimately, the driver has the responsibility of ensuring that people enter the bus, they are drove to their place of destination safely. He accounts for whatever revenue is going to the owner if there's an owner of the car and he's not the owner driver in this context. So the analysis of, the example of a car driver, of a bus driver, he being the mate to the driver, was basically to tell the Ghanaian people that, look, I was playing a supporting role to the president. The president was given the ultimate task.
But the president was fully aware that he was playing that supporting role. That's why he said, Bawumia, Bawumia, the economist par excellence, the economic whiskey. The president was fully aware of that. And ab initio, he painted the picture that, in fact, the president said, I am no economist. I don't know about economics. But I have got someone who is an economist, who knows economics, who will change the fortunes of our country. So,
the president knew ab initio that he was not an economist. The vice president provided that complementary role to something he did not have. The president was also equally aware that when it comes to the finances and the management of the economy, the constitution has placed it on the president, and that he delivers that through the finance minister.
So are you saying the president wasn't necessarily honest in
I'm
that
saying
regard?
The president was very honest.
Or that maybe even the vice president himself was not very honest about the situation.
The president was very honest when he said that Bawumia is an economist. He has the wisdom as an economist. His head is a very excellent and brilliant economist who can support me to deliver fortunes to the Ghanaian people. He was very honest. And I'm saying that, like I said, I'm happy with the contribution of Dr. Bawumia to the fortunes of the Ghanaian people. And like we have mentioned, no vice president, and the president is justified, even on hindsight, that if you look at the contribution of every vice president to the economy and to supporting the president, this vice president is an exception. This vice president, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, has performed wonders, has performed things that no vice president was able to support his president to perform. So to that extent, the president was the president is justified to say that Dr. Bawumia was an exceptional person who was coming in to support me, deliver fortunes, prosperity to the Ghanaian people.
I think we'll have to stay much longer on this, because the economy, like it or not, is going to be one of the crucial focal areas. Of course, later we'll talk about corruption and everything in between. But I want to take us back, and thankfully my producer, director, my team has been able to find some of the files. We're going to take you back, way back to many years ago, 2016 to be specific, and Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, then running mate to now President Akufo-Addo, and his address, some of the questions he posed to former President Mahama, with Amy Sir Arthur as basically the one to be lampooned. Let's watch this.
So, what does the data say about the state of our economy after 8 years of economic management under the NDC, with President John Mahama in charge as the head of the economic management team for 4 years, and president for another 4. Mr. Chairman, any assessment about the state of the economy and the performance of the government must be against the background of the amount of money or resources that has been available that has been at the disposal of any government. At a public lecture in September 2008, the then Vice Presidential candidate, John Mahama, said, and I quote, "To whom much is given, much is expected," end quote. I would like, with his permission, to borrow his exact words to describe his government's exact performance in the last 8 years. In this regard, it is important to emphasize, for the record, that measured in terms of today's dollars and cedis, no government since independence has had the amount of resources in terms of tax revenue, cocoa exports, gold exports, oil revenues, and loans as the 2 NDC administrations between 2009 and 2016. Under the 8 years of the MPP government, from 2001 to 2008, taxes and loans only amounted to 20 billion Ghana cedis. In contrast, taxes, loans, and oil revenues alone over the last 8 years would amount to 248 billion Ghana cedis. So, what you see in the diagram, in the graph there, the Mills-Mahama government over the last 8 years would have had more than 12 times the nominal resources that the MPP had, 12 times the number. The question, therefore, that Ghanaians should be asking is, how has the management of the huge resources at the disposal of the John Mahama government impacted on the economy? Let's look at the real sector. Mr. Chairman, a key statistic that measures the performance of any economy is its gross domestic product. This is the total income of the country or its total production. If the country were a maize farm, the GDP will be the total bags of corn that we produce every year. If the economy is doing well, we will produce more bags of corn each year. If, however, you can only account for a few bags of corn after 8 years of farming, you cannot attempt to claim credit by saying that you used a lot of fertilizer. If in the presence of good rains, you claim to have used a lot of fertilizer, but still end up with a poor harvest, you are likely not a good farmer. Mr. Chairman, a second and just as important statistic is how many people in the country have benefited from the bags of corn we produce. Are incomes rising for all or just a few? Data from the real sector indicates the following developments over the last 8 years and before. Between December 2000, Mr. Chairman, and December 2008, without oil, economic growth in Ghana increased from 3.7% to 9.1% without oil. After declining to 4.8% in 2009, real GDP growth increased to 7% in 2010 and 14% in 2011 because of the discovery of oil. However, since 2011, real GDP has declined steadily and drastically to 3.9% in 2015. Mr. Chairman, you recall that in 2000 we were growing at 3.7% when we were HIPIC. After discovering oil, we are pretty much growing at the same rate. President Mahama's tenure of office, as can be seen in the graph, has been characterized by declining economic growth. And this is what you see. From 2012, 2013 coming down, you've come all the way down. Mr. Chairman, between 2000 and 2008, the size of Ghana's economy increased from $5.1 billion to $28.5 billion. This was a 459% increase in 8 years. Even in the face of global economic and financial crisis in 2007 and 2008, with oil prices reaching a record high $147 a barrel, economic growth, as I said, rose to 9.1% in 2008. However, notwithstanding the oil discovery, GDP has increased from $28.5 billion in 2008 to a projected $40 billion in 2016, which is a 40% increase in 8 years. But you will see what is interesting about this data is that MPP increased GDP by 459%, NDC increased it by 40%, but when you look at the tenure of President Mahama, between 2012 and 2016, Ghana's GDP has shrunk by 5%.
Ladies and gentlemen, then running mate Bawumia, now vice president and flag bearer of the MPP. Let's hold him to the same standards he held others to. So let's come into the studio. Kabiru, I'll walk you through some highlights I picked from there. So what has the NDC done? What do they have to show with Mahama as head of the economic management team? His words, not my words. Head of the economic management team for 4 years and president for another 4 years. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to give each person a trial and error situation where you must serve as vice and serve as president. So let's get that clear. He mentioned as head of the EMT. That's what he said, which means his position was no different. Then he talks about money at the disposal of the government. In fact, he talks about the fact that the Mahama administration at a point had 12 times the resources that the erstwhile administration had had. Let's walk through what this administration has had. You say to whom much is given, much is expected, much is required. You've borrowed almost 500 billion Ghana cedis. That is, in sum, more than any other administration has done. In fact, our debt at the time when the NDC was handing over hovered around 122 billion. Now we all know where it is. You've had more oil wells added to our oil streams. COVID-19 funds amounted to about 21 billion Ghana cedis. Add to all of this, are you aware that the current prices of cocoa have hit a high on the back of some diseases in other parts of the world? Cocoa is selling. Many people are not aware of this. It's selling at record rates currently. If you look at what this administration has had versus what the previous administration had, who then has had more resources in terms of borrowing, in terms of COVID-19 that you lament about, which you earned 21 billion Ghana cedis from, in terms of all the resources that have been pumped in, and now the IMF program? He says, if you have more fertilizer but you have a poor harvest, then you are likely not a good farmer. I don't know what you make of all this.
And so the vice president was clear that the then president and also former vice president was head of the EMT and president for 4 years. And he was asking him to account for such periods. So it wasn't only in reference to the fact that he was the head of the EMT. That said, he said, and clearly so, to whom so much is given, so much is expected in return. For this government, I can't, with a snap of finger, list a number of things that were never done, and that can speak to the money that was received by the government. For instance, if every year $1 billion, convert that to Ghana cedi, is used to service your excess capacity payments, you have to take it from that money you are getting.
I see.
Okay. If
do we still have excess capacity?
We have. We
do.
We still have excess capacity.
Wow. It's interesting you say that, Ghana, and it's worthy of mention because we've been told that for about 2 years now we've not had excess capacity. That in fact, we supply to other countries, and you know that basically when you look at our composition, you're saying we still have excess capacity.
That we still have excess capacity for which payment is made by the government, and government is even concluding the renegotiation of the IPPs to do away with some of these excess capacity payments. Okay, installed capacity of power, independent power generators is visited on the government, even though some of them are not producing the full capacity.
In any case, if you have excess capacity, and we've spoken about this for years, for a group that wants to harness the economy on thriving industry and business, what would you do with that excess capacity?
Probably you would want to do, but the problem with the excess capacity is that the cost of production is not even friendly to the business community. You have to find a way of having a mix that will bring down the cost of energy in order that you give it to businesses so that they can produce, and also you'll be able to get some revenue. Even to export power to Cote d'Ivoire, our power exporter is sometimes even more expensive than the power they generate, so you cannot sell. So this is the problem with this excess capacity, is that we generated power which is so expensive that even to sell it in the market is so expensive, no one is willing to buy, because we entered into agreement that were not, if you like, that did not make economic sense. So that's one.
So you'd rather hold the power than sell it and make the difference and maybe add it to your liabilities in terms of paying off your liabilities.
If you do a business and you make a net loss, it's better not doing that business.
Okay.
So if I have a phone, I have to sell it and I have to probably make a loss on the sale because the one to take it doesn't think it's a scrap. I'll better keep it.
But if you're going to pay that same amount anyway, this would offset part of your cost, right?
But there's also the generation cost. So if it's offset, what about the cost of transportation? What about the cost of transaction? Who pays for that? Okay, so sometimes you may have it, but it will not make sense to sell it because of the situation you find yourself. So sometimes that's a problem. The government can also account for the fact that for the first time, more than 11,000 kilometers of roads have been constructed. We have in Sawam ongoing. You have seen those who have traveled on this particular road, you see the massive work ongoing. That is part of the money. The government has also employed at least some 1 million people in the public sector. Those people have to be paid, including those already on the payroll. That is the money being used. The government has also constructed more railways than any government. That is part of the money. 18 district hospitals, 20 polyclinics have been completed. And also we have Agenda 111 ongoing, over 100 of them. That is part of the money. So for any person to say that this government has not used, we have more fish landing sites than any other government has constructed. That is part of the money. We have constructed more interchanges than any other government has constructed. That is part of the money. So this government can clearly account for the money that has been received, the development that the Ghanaian people have also received in return for that money. It is a case that when you receive so much and you cannot account for that, that's where the problem begins. So the Vice President, even at his Kasua lecture, Yesu Krum, it was clearly an account for the money that the government received through borrowing or revenue generated.
All right. So hold for me. Let me bring in Kofi Adjei. But before I do so, Ghana, I'm going to leave this one to you. I'm not going to do the work for you today. I want you to send me messages because Dr. Kabiru Mahama is saying all the money, the 500 plus billion, it went into your roads, for example, the 11,000 kilometers plus that purportedly has been brought to bear. Have you felt the impact of those roads? He talks about Agenda 111. We know it's in the offing. I don't think we can even use that as a metric because most of them are nowhere near completion. So how do you even use them as a metric? But he also talks about railways. I don't know how many of them. I know there's a plan to get some of them into the country from Poland, I believe. But are your rails working? And how, from where I sit, I would ask myself how that has impacted our economy. A good rail network impacts the economy. Send your messages. I want to know from you out there. But let me bring in Kofi Adjei. So Isaac Kofi Adjei, is with our research desk. There's been a lot of talk about some of what the Vice President has said in respect of the economy. We're going to fact check some of the things that he said. Kofi Ajay joins me. Kofi, good morning. You would have to unmute, Kofi.
Ben, I'm on mute. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you now. So I know we're going to be talking about inflation's decline, about the fiscal deficit, among others. But I'm going to leave it to you. Just walk us through. What are some of the claims of the Vice President? What is fact? What is fiction? What is truth? And what is not? Walk us through them.
Well, Ben, so basically, let's start with inflation because it's currently the most spoken about economic indicator, if not the depreciation or exchange rate. So the Vice President made a very categorical statement about the state of Ghana's inflation rate. And he says that inflation has actually declined from 54% in January to 23% in December 2023. So we decided to fact check and see how the president came about these figures and what he sought to achieve with it. So we decided to look at the real figures from the Ghana Statistical Service. If you look at the Ghana Statistical Service inflation bulletin, and then we can see that for the month of January 2023, was somewhere around, it's indeed 23%, but the price figure was 23.2%. And in December, it was 53.6% January. So if you look at it, what the Vice President did was to actually run the December 2023 figure to 23, and then decided that he will run to the nearest figure to make the inflation of December 2023 also bigger. So if you look at the judgment that we came with, the verdict, so you can say that if you look at the Ghana Statistical Service inflation bulletin, you can say it is true that December was 23.2%. It just deviated by just 0.2%. Forgive me for that. But it's not accurate to say that the rate was 54% in January 2024. The accurate figure, we must say, was 53.6%, because 0.4% in inflation terms is huge. So you can't, run the other one down and run this one up to make it look like there's supposed to be some massive improvement there. There was another, claim on our fiscal deficits. He spoke a lot about the nature of Ghana's fiscal debt. And the reason why this is important, remember the finance minister came before a committee somewhere last year or so as a result of the minority saying that they had actually abused the Fiscal Responsibility Act and they had gone beyond the threshold that they were supposed to operate within. The Vice President made some claims about what they came to inherit in 2016, what they had in 2019, and then in 2020 when COVID struck, what the fiscal deficit actually went to. So he speaks about 8.4% in 2016, 4.1% in 2019, and 10.8% in 2020. We looked at the 2016 figure, and our verdict is that it's actually false to say that 2016 the fiscal deficit was 8.4. In fact, if you look at the Finance Ministry's 2016 fiscal data sheet, and it's available on the Finance Ministry's website currently, the figure they quoted for 2016 was 7.8. And so what the Vice President mentioned was higher than what is actually recorded in some official documents like the Ministry of Finance data sheets available on their website. We decided to probe further and find more proof to test the claim. And you can see the 2017 IMF Article 4, Table 1, page 7, puts the overall fiscal deficit around 9.3%, higher than what the Vice President actually quoted. So In fact, the overall could mean that there were other costs that we incurred in that year that were added. Remember that sometimes, government decides to add some special costs like the energy sector level, costs that they incurred, or even the financial sector cleanup. All those things sometimes are taken out, and when you add them, you see the figure also going up. So 2016 figure, very contradictory. Then 2019, he said the fiscal deficit was 4.1. Per our checks from the fiscal data by the Finance Ministry was 4.8. Ministry of Finance 2019 fiscal sheet, if you include financial sector cleanup, you are looking at 5.8 and not the 4.1 that the Vice President mentioned. So if you put together all our expenses that year and the costs we incurred, the overall fiscal deficit, what truly reflects the economy, was 5.8%. And this was actually put out by the Finance Ministry in their fiscal data sheet. Then if you go to the IMF Article 4, document, table title, Ghana selected economic and financial indicators, 2019 to 2022. The figure there is 7.5%. So IMF puts a figure of 7.5%. And if you exclude, so including financial sector cleanup and the debt we incurred from, other sectors like the energy, we were talking about 7.5. But if you exclude it, then the actual figure there was 4.7%. And all these figures are higher than the 4.1% that the Vice President quoted when he gave that speech. 2020, we also found a claim to be some sort of, there's some, falsehood in there where the figure that the Vice President mentioned actually contradicts the available data provided by both the Finance Ministry and the IMF. So sometimes what the Vice President does is that he picks the fiscal data in terms of commitments and compare it to the cash of a certain year, and that can give you that narration that he wanted. But if you really study the data well, you realize that there are some sort of discrepancies between what he mentions and what's actually recorded in our official document. So the Ministry of Finance 2020 fiscal data sheet, without financial sector cleanup, puts the figure at 11.7%. 11.7%, and the Vice President mentioned 10.8%. Ministry of Finance, again, 2020 fiscal data sheet, with the financial sector cleanup, we were talking about 13.8%. So it was a matter of pick and choose which of the figures that would suit the occasion. So the Vice President decided to go for the 10.8%, which does not truly reflect the economic situation of Ghana.
So you're telling me that even when he was picking figures, sometimes he would massage the figures to suit the political cause he represented, right?
So he, not to say massage, but he will pick figures, and the level at which you are supposed to compare those figures, I mean, it's not possible. For instance, you can't pick the fiscal data on commitment basis and compare it to cash basis. If you are doing cash, do cash and cash.
Right.
If you are doing do commitment and commitment. So
they don't mix.
The category, exactly, you find those two narratives were not, there was not that, uniformity for you to do that sort of comparison. So he picks commitment data and compares it to that of cash data.
So it's basically like comparing apples and oranges, so to speak.
Exactly. And that could be misleading in some instances, because you're not talking about the true state of the economy. You're not talking about what other official, institutions like the IMF are recording in their books. So for the instance, the 2021 IMF Article 1 data puts Ghana's fiscal deficit. The preliminary figure was 15.2%. 15.2%. That's way higher than the commitment figure of 10.8% mentioned by the Vice President. So you could see that was not the true reflection of Ghana's, fiscal data. It was not 10.8%. is probably within the figure mentioned by the Finance Ministry or what they reported to the IMF and what has been captured in the IMF Article 4 review document.
Okay, so let's quickly look at some other claims made by the Vice President in respect of our GDP and other matters. What else does he say that we fact-checked?
So, I mean, if we look at, let's talk about, there were other things he said that were completely true. So 2020, he actually made some claims about the fiscal data as well. We checked, and they were true. But one other claim that we found to be contradictory in terms of what the Vice President was saying and what a certain ministry, which is supposed to be the primary source of such data, was also reported, was a claim that in 2018, there was a total of 346,911 passports, being issued that year. So we decided to check. And if you are talking about passports and you want passport data, then the best place to go is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration. They are the primary producers of such data.
Right.
So if you want the official government source, then the ministry should be the primary or the go-to platform to get that data. So we decided to look through what they call the program-based budget for that ministry, which is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration. So we saw that the figure that they mentioned or quoted for 2018 was smaller than what the Vice President actually mentioned. So what the Vice President mentioned was about times 2.
Hello, Kofi. All right, we'll try to get Kofi back. He was just on the point about the claim made by the Vice President that in 2018, a total of 346,911 passports were issued. And of course, he was making mention of the fact that if you want such data, the best place to go to is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration. Kofi is back. We lost you for a few seconds.
Yeah, man, so I was saying that if you look at what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs recorded in their program-based budget, plus what the Vice President mentioned was way smaller, or what the Vice President mentioned was about times 2 of what was recorded in the ministry's document. I don't know why this is so, but I feel there is some sort of contradiction in what the Vice President mentioned versus what the ministry also put out in their program-based budget. They quote a figure of 194,549. The Vice President mentioned over 346,000. And in that year, it is interesting to know that if you look at the ministry's target in terms of passport registration for that year, their total target was 200,000. And they stated in the program-based budget that they could not meet this target because it fell short by some, marginal, percentage there, where you see 194,000 being compared to 200,000. So what the Vice President quoted in his address was way higher. We do not know why this is so, but we believe that for us to get that primary data for such a the best place to go is the Foreign Affairs Ministry to get that data. So these are some of the claims that we've been fact-checking, going through the statement or the speech. We are not done yet. There's more to come, but currently this is what we've been able to fact-check, and these are verdicts.
All right. Before you take leave of me, Kofi, I just want you to clarify this for me. If I look at what you've just presented, so in terms of inflation, there is some truth with an inaccuracy because of the 0.4% difference. Then you go to another claim. There's another truth somewhere which also has. So the deficits, the 10.8% versus the 15.2%. So it is partly true. So here's what I have put down. There is one truth with an inaccuracy, one point that is partly true, also with an inaccuracy, and 5 false statements. That's what this shows, right?
Absolutely.
So of the 7 claims, that the Vice President made, those that we fact-checked here, 2 were partly true and 5 were completely false.
Completely false, yeah.
All right.
Completely false based on available data from official documents and parent ministries that are supposed to provide those documents. We compared and we found out that what the vice president put out was completely at variance with what those official documents have to provide.
And of course, we are sourcing this information from what? The Ghana Statistical Service, the Finance Ministry, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration. So you can't go wrong with them. These are source entities. Kofi, thank you so much for joining the conversation. You've added a whole lot to enrich the conversation. Isaac Kofi is with our research team. He's a research and data analyst. He joined the conversation. Over to you. Out of 7 claims that we fact-checked, 2, partly true. Partly true. 5, completely false. How do you react?
So first and foremost, if you give me time to also fact-check what we've just fact-checked, you also realize that there were some inaccuracies also in just what you presented.
I see.
And before I even go into that, let me note that when it comes to data, to the extent that someone provides you source of his data, and his source of data can be verified from that particular source book, then all other issues becomes an issue of whether or not that parent source is correct or not. I don't have reasons to believe or disbelieve the work that has been done by Kofi. Okay, that's Kofi, right?
Yes,
Done by
Isaac
Kofi.
Kofi.
I have no reason to that because it's based on documents he has perused. But let's even take the issue of inflation, which you were saying is been mad. The person says that inflation was 54, when in actual case it was 53.7.
53.6.
Okay, basically the person has even made the government look bad when it comes to the politics of it.
No.
Let me explain.
Let me clarify for you. If someone says inflation was 54%,
yes,
and we brought it down to 23.2%, the person is basically claiming an extra 0.4% of effort that never happened.
No. So let me tell you why.
He was making himself look good.
Let me tell you why. The
The
person says that inflation was 54 when it was 53.7. And the person, yes, 53.6. And the person says that we brought it down to 23. One is 23.1. The difference between the points, in fact, it has made the government look bad because the difference is actually at the disadvantage of the government.
But that is still clearly not
true. No, it's still clear because...
Can you listen to me? If 54,
yes,
53.6,
yes,
minus 54, or
yes,
if you do the reverse,
yes,
you get a difference of 0.4. If he said that they had brought inflation down to 23, which is 23.2, 0.4 minus 0.2 still is an add-on of 0.2. He was still making government look good. I mean, that's basic economics.
The number is 23 point what? The actual number is 23 point what?
23.2. And there's 53.6 versus 54.
Yeah, so that gives you a difference of, if you just say
0.2.
0.2. No, if that gives a difference of 0.2, but he has also made the government look bad. 0.4.
Did it make him look good?
No, he made the government look bad. Take the 53.
I am stunned that you're doing the mathematics and you're still saying
I'm clear in this particular point that if you say that inflation was 54, okay, let's assume that it's been padded by 0.4.
Right.
Okay, and the reduction is now 23.6 or 23.2, and you say it's 23. It also means that you have also reduced your
by 0.2. Right? So he still added on 0.2 to benefit government.
So that's what I'm saying. That when it comes to specific figures, we don't go to this triviality. Because on one hand, he has made the government look bad. On the other hand, the government looks...
Okay, let's even come to that.
Fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit. No, I want to come to this specific because there are claims made.
We don't have that.
Yeah, but when you make the claims that the vice president has misrepresented fact, and they are also...
That's why I want us to go to the meat of the matter, not the small ones that may have...
No, even so, I'm coming to fiscal deficit.
Okay, so let's get to
fiscal deficit. I have the highlight of the budget for 2017. That clearly put the fiscal deficit at 8.7 for 2016. The budget is on just here. So I don't know where Kofi got their figure from to suggest that the vice president was wrong. Fiscal deficit, the budget highlight, is clearly with me here. Okay, the figure is 8.7. And if you want to know the true budget figure, if you are using the 2016 budget, you get it wrong because that will be estimate or projection. To get the right figure, go and use 2017.
But if you look at the 2016 finance fiscal data sheet, it points to 7.8%. In fact,
And
the IMF itself, in its Article 4 statement, tables 1 and page 7, puts the overall fiscal deficit at 9.3%.
I'm saying that, well, these are different. I'm saying that on the issue of...
Unless you're saying...
If you are going to...
What information you have versus what the information the IMF
I'm coming to the IMF
very
figure.
different.
I'm coming to the IMF figure. I'm telling that that's 2020. That one is different. We're talking of 2016. 2016 is what...
This is actually 2016.
2016 that we are referring to. And I'm saying that for 2016, if you are going to the 2016 budget highlight, you get it terribly wrong. Reason being that, as at 2016, they are based on projections. To get the accurate figure, it is 2017 that they report. 2017 that they report actual figures for 2016. So on this particular document I have, 8.7, the Vice President couldn't be wrong. Even if there's any wrong data, that is coming from the source of the Vice President. 2, he said 2020 fiscal deficit was projected to be 11.1, and the Vice President state is 10.8. When in the document, the Vice President never told you whether it's on cash basis or commitment basis. You go to use your cash basis as a basis of lampoon or poo-pooing the Vice President.
So why did the Vice President?
No, I'm even saying that in the first place.
If not
the logical question
for reasons that may not, lend to factual analysis, why would he put it out there without stating?
The logical question that anyone wanting to do a fact check, Rabin, is the Vice President using commitment basis or using
but he made mention of that.
He never mentioned that.
He mentioned that there's commitment and cash.
And I'm saying that the Vice President, let me read the specific portion. The Vice President mentioned that he never mentioned whether commitment or cash basis.
No, and I'm saying Kofi Ajay mentioned that.
Kofi Ajay said that.
He made mention of
the Vice President. The Vice President in his speech said, mention a figure. He never told you whether it's cash basis or commitment. You go to take.
Do you know why?
You go to take cash basis and say the Vice President is wrong. Okay. You don't also do that. You should have asked the Vice President, the figure you are mentioning, is it commitment or cash basis?
Okay.
Right. That is how we can do the analysis and be fair to the Vice President figure and also to be fair to Kofi on this issue.
But we have done our fact check, and these are the results, the tail of the tape. Yeah. If you have different data or data that points to something else, we can get to that. Isaac Kofi Ajay wants to explain part of your concerns to you. Kofi, go ahead.
Ben.
Yes.
Yeah, so, he's asking whether, he said the Vice President was not very categorical, whether it was commitment or was cash. I'm just saying that if you are talking about fiscal deficit, you can either choose to talk about the overall fiscal deficit if you include everything. You can talk about the cash or commitment. We did not just fact check commitment or cash. We said that if you look at all the 3 indicators, cash, commitment, and even what was provided in the budget, none of the figures quoted by the Finance Ministry, if you look at that of 2020 fiscal deficit, for instance, we did not take the data from 2020 budget. It's not possible. We know that if you want to get the final data for 2020, the best place to go is 2021 mid-year budget. So if you go to the 2021 mid-year budget, you get all the final data for 2020. And that is where the Ministry of Finance puts a figure of 11.4. And that's higher than what the Vice President quoted, 10.8. Look at the Ministry of Finance, whether cash, whether commitment, whether overall, it is not 10.8. And if you have the Ministry of Finance and another credible organization like the IMF, that the Ministry of Finance feeds them with data, or quoting different figures that are way higher than what the Vice President said, I don't think that it's fair to say that, we just decided to pick and choose which data to actually, decide to debunk what the Vice President said. And if you are talking about 2016, you should know that we did not use 2016 data to fact check 2016. We mentioned where we got the 2016 data from. The 2016 data we had was a final sheet prepared by the Finance Ministry. And then also a 2017 Article 4 document, which is at least a year higher than 2016. So that can give us a fair idea of what happened in 2016.
Which also indicates that there's no way that figure could have been wrong because there was an extra year, which is exactly what I was pointing to him.
If we are wrong,
then the IMF is also wrong.
The Ministry provided wrong figures to the IMF, or they themselves reported wrong figures. So I don't know where the
Kofi, thank you very much. We're not going to have a banter on this because we don't have enough time.
I'm going to read
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Go ahead.
The overall budget deficit on a cash basis as of December 2022 was 11.7. It wasn't 11.4.
Okay.
Of GDP.
What's your source?
That's the Minister of Finance 2021 budget highlight. That's anyway.
Unless I have different documents.
As against a revised target of 11.4. So he's using a revised target as a basis for the determination. It wasn't a revised target. It is the actual figure, which is 11.7. So you cannot use revised target, which is clearly what the document has said, as at the end of 2021.
Dr. Kabir,
so this argument we'll have
this conversation moving forward, because I know from your end you always try to dispute the figures, but like we are saying, unless what you fed to the IMF was also wrong, I just have this. I don't know whether you can help me in 30 seconds to do this. If the fundamentals are weak, your exchange rate will expose you. I've always wanted an explanation based on what the Vice President said then and his clarification. Was it last year?
Yeah.
That
2019.
Can you explain that to me? I still don't understand his justification in less than a minute, and then we are gone.
So the Vice President stated that if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. But that was not a statement that if the exchange rate is depreciating, it means that your fundamentals are weak.
Okay.
Basically, that was why he conveyed. For instance, if you say that if you have headache, then you must be suffering from malaria. Okay. Then I have malaria, then you say that I'm having headache. You could have malaria without headache. Okay, so that was the basic of the Vice President. So when you look at the exchange rate depreciation, you may be other factors.
Okay.
For instance, external attack. Okay. Speculation, which has nothing to do with macroeconomic fundamentals. Speculation, we may say somehow, may have something to do with confidence in your macroeconomy. But for instance, hikes in Federal Reserve rates, it has nothing to do with your macroeconomic fundamentals.
Do you know what I'm deducing from this as we go? It is clear that when you look on the other side, there may be other factors. You may not look at them, but when it's you, then it may be different. There's this saying that we are the best judges of others and the best lawyers for ourselves. But anyway, thank you for joining the conversation, Dr. Mahama. Dr. Kabiru Mahama, he's technical advisor to the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, and flag bearer of the MPP. Now, when we return, we still have conversations to come your way. GUTA, the Ghana Union of Traders Association, has announced its intention to establish a social contract with presidential contenders in the upcoming 2024 election. We'll bring you details on that after the break. Do stay.